In this video, I'm going to be discussing a new ethical tool set, so to speak. Two famous ethical tool sets are the categorical imperative proposed by Immanuel Kant and the utilitarian perspective, which is a subset of the consequentialist movement. Now, I see deep flaws in both systems when taken to their extremes. So what I've attempted to do is construct a system that takes the best of both of these and combines them into a hybrid philosophy that seems to be workable in most situations. Now, the categorical imperative has problems because it suggests that one act in such a way that their actions become universal law. In other words, I wouldn't kill somebody because I wouldn't want to live in a world where everyone would kill somebody, or I wouldn't lie because I don't want to live in a world where everyone lies. So you choose your actions based on what you would be fine with accepting as universal behavior. Well, that breaks down in cases like when you have a complex ethical dilemma, say you're in Nazi Germany and you're hiding Jews in your basement to protect them from being taken off to a death camp. What do? Well, the Kantian perspective says that, well, you've already decided that lying is pretty easy to conclude would be something that you wouldn't want to live in a world of liars, so you would choose not to lie. If you were a pure Kantian, you would choose not to lie, and in which case you would be taken away and killed, as would all the Jews you're hiding in the basement. Not a wise policy. Any rational, ethical, moral person would say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's terrible. So the Kantian perspective fails in that respect. The utilitarian perspective, when taken to its own extremes, falls apart as well. The utilitarian perspective says that our decisions should be based on whatever brings the greatest good to the greatest number. Not only are there problems with defining greatest good and greatest number, that's the least of the problems. The biggest problem is it can lead to some really bad situations. Say there were 20 babies, and the act of killing these 20 babies and cutting them up and doing research on them would absolutely 100% prove a cure for cancer. Would create a cure for cancer, killing all these children. Should we do it? I mean, it would save millions of lives and you'd sacrifice 20. That clearly would create a really dystopian society with a lot of really bizarre problems. So, no, I would argue that would be a terrible idea. So that breaks down. I propose a system that is somewhat of a hybrid between the two. I call it sliding scale ethics. The first thing you do in sliding scale ethics is you set up a scale where you rank each virtue. For the example I'm going to use, the 4 virtues that I'm going to be discussing are the virtues of truth, the virtue of telling the truth, the virtue of preventing suffering, and the virtue of preventing death. And then I would rank them in a specific order. I would put the truth as a very important virtue to me. I would put it close to preventing death, just slightly under death, preventing suffering, and then much farther down, lying would be much farther down. So I've set up some scale there. Okay, now let's use a demonstration to show what I mean by sliding scale. Okay, I've set up my scale. Truth at the top, then preventing death, then preventing suffering, then telling the truth. That's how I rank my virtues. Okay, now let's look at the situation of the Nazi Germany, let's look at the Nazi Germany situation again, where the Nazi comes knocking at your door and asks if you're hiding any Jews. Well, in that situation, truth and telling the truth are impacted negatively. In other words, they become less important in such a situation. So on the scale, both of them are pushed down lower. And saving lives, because that's a situation where saving lives is, I mean, that's a life or death situation that's very apparent. It's not like your chances of getting in a car accident where life or death is not so apparent, or your chances of getting in a plane accident where life or death is not so apparent. No, this is a case where if you tell the truth, you and those Jews are going to die. So those things, those two, preventing suffering and preventing death, get a huge boost. And so, based on this, you now have a new scale. Truth has been moved down, telling the truth has been moved quite far down, and preventing suffering has been moved pretty far up, and really far up is preventing death. And you take your ideal system, the ideal scale that we started with, and then you skew it by looking at the particular situation, and then having this new skewed scale, you use this skewed scale to come up with your moral decision. And in the skewed scale, we have death, and prevention of death and prevention of suffering much higher on this scale, or at least they would be for me, than truth and telling the truth. In this case, I would definitely lie. Now, this is a form of situational ethics, but it's a form of situational ethics that allows for a consequentialism attitude. You can still use situational ethics in the sense you can still look at the consequences of your choice to determine what's the best choice, but it also allows for you to bring in some virtues. So it's also, in a sense, a combination of virtue ethics as well, because it allows you to bring in sort of categorical imperative-like ideas that that might affect your decision. I mean, we're not just beings who do things for the greater good, and that can lead to a real dystopia. I mean, Soviet Russia supposedly did everything for the greater good, and if everybody sacrifices everything to make society happy, well, then nobody's truly happy, so what good is that? So obviously, pure utilitarianism can lead to some really bizarre and terrible consequences, and the Kantian perspective can lead you to be stubborn in situations where more flexibility is allowed. So by incorporating some idea of virtues to prevent it from being too flexible, but also to allow the value and ranking of each of those virtues to shift depending on the situation, I think I've created a system that, while technically harder to work with and harder to figure things out in, I think really surpasses the two major problems of pure utilitarianism and pure Kantian perspective. I think that this subject is rather interesting, and I would ask that you please comment, and I'd really like to ask anybody that's also interested in this subject to send a video response to me, because I'm really interested in having a discussion on this. This could turn out to be an interesting discussion. Maybe we could even come up with some moral system that's better.